There are many roles one can play in the relationship. Yes, you play a role. And by understanding which of these categories of role you play in your relationship, you can understand a lot of things about yourself and why things go a certain way within your relationships. There was a psychiatrist by the name of Stephen Karpman, and he is from the 1968. And he put some roles down, and he described them as whether one is the rescuer, the persecutor, or the victim in the relationship. So the persecutor and the rescuer and the victim are all of these roles that you can play in your relationship. So the relationship roles interact with one another. So always in a relationship, somebody is much more powerful. And they compete, let's say in a way, with the one that has less power. So when it comes to relationships, a lot of couples get into problems and they find themselves in this drama triangle, let's say, and by becoming aware of these types of roles, you can see where one brings out all of these unhelpful behavior patterns. And you can see and you can fix that. So, of course, in these roles, individuals may shift between all of these different roles, and they usually feel more comfortable in any of these roles due to the type of personality that they are and what type of behavior patterns they grew up in their families. The rescuer is the type of person that puts others first in order to feel that they're valued, that they're irreplaceable, or they might be demanding respect. And usually these types of people are ones that grew up in a family where their child needs were not acknowledged. And so therefore, while growing up, when they go out seeking for partners or any relationship dynamics, they're looking after other people's needs so they can get that love that they never had in their childhood. So usually the rescuer was the good and responsible child who might have avoided confrontation. Now, on the contrary, the victim role that one plays is when one feels overwhelmed with helplessness, hopelessness, powerlessness, or they can even feel shame. So these types of people got the message from their family that they were not able to handle their own problems. And so while growing up, they expected others to step in and make things okay. And usually these types of people feel quite anxious about things. Now, the other role is the persecutor, or let's call it the judge. So this is a person who is criticizing their partner and they're acting in a way like an instigator. So they make others feel unworthy or unsure about themselves, and usually they blame other people for what is wrong in their life. But what is important for you to understand is that underneath that persecutor exists a victim. So someone who as a child did not have their needs met, and that's why they often feel powerless. And by putting their partner down, it helps them to escape their inner self-love and their inner self of low self-worth, and that makes them feel powerful. So if you have an understanding of the roles that people go through and why they behave the way they behave, you can just be compassionate about it So there you can come to realize that a lot of people out there don't intend to harm the other human being. And it's based on these matters that we need to look into the depth of the psyche. So the person in the rescuer role in the relationship, they had the nice guy control. They look into the victim. The person is that role feels overwhelmed at times. They might be feeling that the problems are falling down on her head. The rescuer can step in and say, I can help you out. Just do what I say and everything will be fine. And oftentimes couples begin their relationship in some form of this. It's kind of like they're psychologically cutting a deal. So the rescuer says that they will agree to a big, strong, good and nice, and the victim can say, I will agree to be overwhelmed and unable to manage. And then everyone gets to be happy. The rescuer feels needed, important, and in change, and the victim has someone to take care of himself. And this works fine, except once in a while, one or two things can happen. Sometimes the rescuer can get tired of doing it all. They might feel that he is like shouldering all of the responsibilities and that the other is not pulling his weight. They're not giving back anything. They're not appreciating what the rescuer is doing. And the rescuer gets fed up, they get angry, and then they become resentful. So he can shift over to the prosecutor role, right? Where he suddenly blows up, usually about something minor. Perhaps, they didn't take the dishes, to the sink, or somebody who didn't take out the trash, or, they might go about spending a lot of money. They might go and start drinking. They might go to have an affair because they feel that they deserve it. After all, he says to himself, at what I've been putting up with, So the message underneath the behavior and the anger that usually does not come out very clearly is like, why don't you grow up? Why don't you take some responsibility? Why do I have to do everything around here? Why don't you appreciate what I'm doing for you? This is unfair. And that feeling of unfair is a strong one. So at that point, what happens is the victim can get scared and move up to the rescuer position. And they try to make up and calm the waters. So she might say, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I really do appreciate what you do, and next time I'll do better. Then the persecutor feels bad about whatever he did or said and goes down to the victim position and gets depressed. Then they both stabilize and go back to their original positions. And the other thing that happens sometimes is that the victim gets tired of being the victim. So she might get tired of the other one always running the show, always telling her what to do. She gets tired of being looked down upon because the rescuer is basically saying, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have made it. And everyone once in a while, the victim gets fed up and moves to the persecutor role. So like the rescuer, the victim in this role blows up and gets angry, and it's usually about something small and just acts out. So the message underneath that doesn't get said is, why don't you get off my back? Just leave me alone. Stop controlling my life, just back off. I can do things myself. And the rescuer hears this and moves to the victim position. And then he says to himself, poor me. Every time I try to help, look at what I get. And the persecutor then feels bad about whatever he did or said and goes to the rescuer position and says something like, I was stressed out. I was not taking my depression medications. I'm so tired from the kids. I'm so sorry. And then they make up and go back to where they originally were. Do these stories sound familiar to you? while everyone gets to move along all of these roles, often one will fit more comfortably in one role more than the other. This has to do with their personality, their upbringing, and their learned ways of coping. In order for one to start getting off of this pattern, right, one needs to be able to see and accept and release those underlying needs that fills within the relationship dynamics. And you have to change your role in the dynamic. You've got to become accountable about how you think about things, how you feel, and what behaviors do you bring to the table so that you keep in those types of roles. And you need to have the ability to forgive yourself and accept that the other's behavior is not your fault. And to wrap up with these 3 roles, what I want to tell you is that you need to be able to understand the power and the significance these roles play. Try to resonate why people act on these certain roles. And the reason being is that people are trying to meet their personal needs. And sometimes these needs, they are unconscious. People don't understand that they're doing them. They really don't. Because they are not able to see the bigger picture as a whole and take responsibility for their part in keeping that triangle and everything that's happening surrounding it. So what is needed is anyone on that triangle with these 3 personality roles, let's say, they need to wake up to the roles that they're playing. And one person who can recognize this, right, and can shift out of that role, they can actually catalyze the other to also shift out of the role and the behaviors that they're doing. And what's especially helpful is when people start to begin to grow up and take responsibility and accountability for their own empowerment and rescuing themselves in order to meet their own needs. And if one can see how they can contribute, partnership can begin to flourish. Because one has an understanding of these roles and why these dynamics play out.